Hi, everybody.
One, two.
Don't be jealous, but we've got the set list right here. I have to tell you, Look of Love is not on it. Okay.
It should be on it, yeah. Hello, my name's Martin Fry, and thank you very much for letting me come out tonight and speak to all you wonderful people. Thank you very much. I'm from ABC.
They know why they're here. Everybody good? Yeah. All right. So we're just gonna chat for a little bit, and then we'll get on to the real stuff. But Martin, it is a real treat for me, personal treat, to be on this stage with you. In the 1980s, I was in high school, and I thought I'd get more of a reaction. But I was in high school.
You are a child of the 1980s.
Thank you. And I was about 5'8", 113. I didn't know how to live in my body. I didn't know what it meant to be a young man. There weren't available languages that we have now to talk about different ways of identifying as young people. And I would ride my bike to a record store, and I would pick up copies of Now That's What I Call Music compilations on import. I only hung out in the import section, and I would come home with these cassettes, not vinyl, but cassettes of bands.
You should explain what a cassette is to this
They're back.
very youthful audience, ladies and gentlemen.
Sadly, I think
I am from the world of books, cassettes. I'll be using this terminology, and you'll go, what the hell is he talking about? And albums and vinyl and stuff like that, yeah. It was a medium we used back then.
I would come home with these cassettes, Martin, and they were crucial for how I tried to understand myself. And then I would also watch Richard Blade, Video One. Anyone watch Video One? And you know, of course, one of those cassettes that was crucial for me in my identity as a young person was Lexicon of Love. And I remember holding that cassette. I remember both what it looked like, the cover, the cover art for that record. And I'm just wondering, and now that you've had lots of time for people to tell you about how much your music has meant to them, has a story similar to mine particularly around like the way you guys looked, the way you wore your hair, your suits, that it mattered to people?
Thanks very much, that's very kind. Way back, I started out, are there any musicians here tonight? Yes, I guess. Well, you know that feeling when you got a record collection and you're going to take on the world. You know, for me, I was looking at the Beatles and Rolling Stones and thinking, they're over, you know. I'm in Sheffield, England. I've got this little band in a garage, and we are the future of rock and roll. But I had to persuade everybody else that this was going to be the truth. So I think that's a big part of that moment when you sit down and you try and write a song. You try and say to the world, this is a song, this is worth your time, the price of your admission, sort of thing. So, I forgot any question now, yeah. So, I should say this, that I think music's for outsiders, definitely. For me, growing up in Sheffield, there was a whole generation, and I think it's true of every generation, where you feel a little bit invisible. You feel that kind of your ideas are being ignored when you're young. And I think that's why people make music. I think that's why it's a great chance to kind of meet other musicians. But in Sheffield, I have to say it was very competitive. I was in a band called Vice Versa, and then we evolved into a band called ABC. But there was the Human League there, and Def Leppard, and Cabaret Voltaire, and Artery. There was about 20 other bands. And as anyone knows, when they start doing their gigs, the only other people in the audience are guys in bands. Do you know what I mean? A girl, of all sexes, of course. Men and women in other bands. So I have played many shows through the years. I am an elder statesman of pop now. You know, I'm going to play a show to you tonight. But the hardest gigs we ever did were those where we come out and I could see the audience of Sheffield musicians going, chorus is okay, but I don't like his shoes. You know, it was the most critical audience you could ever get. That's what I'm trying to say. But once you go through that baptism of fire, you kind of find your feet as a songwriter. And I think you alluded to the fact you felt, growing up, I felt like an outsider. You know, I felt there was nobody out there that would understand my vision and what I was thinking. And I think that's true of everybody that gets involved in the arts. That's where you paint a picture. that's where you do all these
So
things.
you were just talking about the importance of Sheffield
Yeah.
for the band's formation. Could you talk a little bit? I mean, you mentioned some of the bands in the '80s, and of course, after the '80s, we can add Pulp and Arctic Monkeys and lots of other folks.
Jarvis Cocker was there, yeah. He's in the corner of the bar, you know, and Joe Elliott from Def Leppard was over there.
So what in that, particularly in that like late '70s, early '80s moment, what was in the water in that town that produced that kind of a scene at that moment?
I'd like to think there was something called inspiration in the local reservoir, but I tell you what it really was. It was desperation, you know, because it was a steel town, a lot of things had closed down. I knew that if I wasn't going to be a professional footballer or, you know, a professional hairdresser, these were the only outlets you had to get out of the city and up and about. You had to make it in a band, and I think that was true. It's true of every city across America today, I think. You know, that's what's happening when people are making their tracks at home and kind of, I think so. I think there's an element of ambition there too.
Yeah, I mean, there's a really great, if folks don't know it, a really great compilation of Sheffield music that came out a few years ago. And the title of it, I think, is really telling. The title of it is Dreams Fill the Vacuum. And it strikes me that in Sheffield, as you mentioned, the closing of the steel mills, that there was an economic crisis, there was a spike in unemployment, and music started shifting from kind of punk to a lot of like much more electronic.
In England it was, post-punk. It was like New Order, The Cure, Depeche Mode, kind of experimental bands like that. Yeah, at the time. Yeah.
But was there a connection between what was going on, like economically, the closing of that kind of labor force, with the change in the music?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, music, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. You know, I have to say, I think most people in the arts are daydreamers. You know, that's why you do creative things. It's kind of, you know, taking something from the ether and making it physical. You know, that's it in a nutshell. Yeah. But it's that's it.
I mean, I think part of what I loved about Lexicon of Love, like so many other people, you know, I remember distinctly putting that cassette on, and the first thing I heard were strings. And hearing strings on a record in which, on the cover, it looked like something like a noir crime drama from the 1940s. In a way, the record was futuristic, and also it was retro at the same time. There was a past and a future.
With music, I've always, and fashion and film, if there's something that's popular, it's always best to go in the opposite direction, you know, and just say, that's over there, I'm going to do something totally different. And I think that maverick spirit is very important for everybody, you know. I'm just talking about ABC. So we decided from an early day, we were going to write songs, but at the time, a lot of the songs in the new wave era were about electric pylons, or, you know, what was the future going to be like, or it was kind of quite cold and unemotional. So I said, right, we had heard a song by Joy Division called Love Will Tear Us Apart, which was a wonderful record. Ian Curtis was a singer, but it was almost like a Frank Sinatra song, you know. It was kind of from a different era, and he was a wonderful, wonderful performer and writer. Sadly, passed away very, very young. He lived real close to where we were growing up. But we decided anyway to kind of say, right, we're going to do love songs. So that's why on the Lexicon of Love you get songs like Poison Arrow, All of My Heart, Look of Love. So when we were playing those songs in Sheffield to our kind of community of bands, they thought we were crazy, but it was kind of felt good, you know. So, you know, I know, say, Billie Eilish is popular now, but you have to go in the opposite direction of what she's doing today, or, you know, today's artists, to find something new and find your voice, basically. So that's why there are a lot of elements. I mean, the bands I was seeing, apart from Sheffield, were the Sex Pistols and the Clash. But we wanted to. We knew we were never going to be as punky as those guys. We had to evolve into something else, and we were obsessed with the idea of making people dance at the time. As were Duran Duran, I suppose, and the Human League, and I think Soft Cell and various bands. We wanted to sound American, you know, like brilliant Tamla Motown records, or, you know, it was an obsession for us, And so I think, by the way, I think failing is as good as succeeding when you're writing a song, and trying to, you know, get your band together and kind of evolve and develop your sound. I definitely think that. Yeah, it's something you don't realize when you're young, but it is. That's where you find the really original stuff. Yeah, within yourself.
It's our motto in all of our classrooms
Is
at
it?
USC, to fail.
Yeah.
No, sorry.
Well, there's no such thing as failure.
Yes.
There isn't any such thing. There are no rules. That's the beautiful thing about
Absolutely.
it. Yeah. Only the ones you choose to apply. Yeah.
There it is. So Lexicon of Love, we've been talking about, turned
Yeah.
40 years old last year.
Oh man, don't say
Crazy,
that.
amazing. But
I wouldn't. When I look into this audience, I don't think anyone is 40 years old. You know what I mean? So I have survived. You have to understand the music. Well, you know, within the music business, 15. Andy Warhol said that 15 minutes was a long time. Well, 15 milliseconds is a long time. You know. So it is a great honor to sit on this stage tonight and then to play later on with the band. After 4 decades. So you know, I don't know where did the time go?
Absolutely. And I mean, you know, I bring that up not only to honor the 4 decades, but
Yeah.
you know, this is a record that you've returned to. You just did a live orchestral version last year, correct?
Yeah.
What was that like, revisiting the record in an orchestral setting in 40 years later in a new century?
It's a show we've developed over the last 10, 15 years, I suppose. Originally, with the Lexicon of Love, we wanted it to sound like it was something from a Powell and Pressburger movie, something from a different decade, you know, with orchestra. We didn't really have the budget to have an orchestra, so we would use string machines and early synthesizers. The period in the 80s where we developed, it was mainly monophonic synthesizers. You couldn't really sequence anything, you know. You can do everything now on a phone. But back then, it would take us months, just as, you know, all the other bands were kind of beavering away in the studio to kind of make these machines sound interesting, you know. But we had a couple of pizzicato strings. We kind of suggested there was a lot of orchestration on there. Years later, with Anne Dudley, an arranger that worked on the original album, it was great to kind of actually evolve and make charts. With real strings, you know, with violins, violas, and cellos, and even the percussion you find in an orchestra. Because, you know, in an orchestra, there's about 4 guys that stand at the back, and they might be waiting there for 2 hours, and then just do a sort of, you know, a splatter stick or something, you know, that was developed. So anyway, it was a bit like ABC 2.0 on steroids, you know. We've got the orchestra there, and it was how we originally conceived of an album all those years ago. So it did feel natural to go and play shows with full orchestra, yeah.
Was there anything, did you learn things about the original music in reinterpreting it?
Yeah, it's to stand on a stage and you grow into some of the songs sometimes. And obviously, the songs I was writing and singing when I was a 21-year-old man, I'm a little older than that now. You know, I'm in my 60s. But it's amazing, really. You kind of evolve into your songs. They become bespoke. Yeah, you kind of get used to them. So people ask me, do you ever tire of singing those songs? And I wonder myself if Mick Jagger tires of singing Satisfaction, or, you know, Elton John doesn't want to do Rocket Man that night or something. But I'm kind of proud of the songs in a way. They're an emblem. Yeah. I should say this. As soon as you make a record, and if you're lucky enough for that record to be a hit record, you lose possession of the record. The public has full possession of it. I'm just the curator, you know. I'm just the guy that shows up. But it's a funny thing, yeah. So I do enjoy playing songs that have evolved over time. Yeah, it's fun, and it's a great honor and a privilege to do it too. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you a question on behalf of all the aspiring journalists and music critics in the house, and that includes really my own story. I started off as a music journalist in my career.
Yeah.
And you started off writing for zines before and kind of as you were becoming a musician.
Yeah, I had a fanzine. Growing up with punk rock, there were great fanzines in England, and I quickly realized that the guys with the fanzines could get into the shows free. You know what I mean? I was on a limited budget. I was a bohemian living in Sheffield, you know. So my fanzine was called Modern Drugs. It was all about everything that stimulated me, and I'd write about... I didn't have enough bands to write about, so I'd write about... I kept a diary, and I'd write about what I ate, you know, which was really boring. But I'd write about what I saw on TV, and then go and interview the pop group Public Image. It was about that time. And in fact, that's how I met the guys in Vice Versa. I went round to their house, like we are doing now, an interview. And they said, well, you can come and stay. We're a three-piece band and one guy's gone missing. So it was good timing, you know. And they said, you know, you won't shut up, Martin. You're a chatterbox, you know. Like, we could use you in our band. So the next day, we went up to a place called Middlesbrough, and they were opening up for a band called Cowboys International, and vice versa was kind of a couple of synthesizers, very much like early Depeche Mode, early Soft Cell, you know. We walked into a room which was full of, do you know what skinheads are? You know, they're kind of like, there's about 3,000 skinheads, these kind of violent gang members.
Southern California, Martin, yes.
And then three rather effete boys with their synthesizers shuffled on stage for my debut show. We had stuff on track and we started up with our vision of the future, our electronic vision. Now, after about 30 seconds, the bottles rained down on us, you know, people are saying, and at the end of it, Mark White and Steve Singleton said, what do you think? And I said, it was fantastic. You know, I loved every minute of it because it was just such a buzz, you know. So after that was my debut into the world of music, yeah, definitely. So I would say to anyone out there, sometimes there are obstacles in the way. Sometimes you play a show, nobody listens to what you're doing. We did a show in Birmingham to about 17 people once. But the beautiful thing was, 4 of them were in Duran Duran. So you never know who's out there, you know. And they were very complimentary, and they said, hey, you know, remember that night, you know, we loved your band, man, you know.
And isn't it true that Lexicon of Love actually came from an article that was written?
Yeah, Ian Penman wrote an article. We play little shows, and the Lexicon of Love is the byline. Yeah, so I stole
you never
that.
Know.
I stole that.
You could write a review and end up naming an album.
I think review. It's important to be a curator and review, even more now than ever before, because there's a volume of information coming at us from every direction. Yeah, you need people to put the signposts out there and write reviews, definitely. You know, I've had good reviews and bad reviews.
Of course.
But there's no such thing as a good or bad. There's just the name check is gold. You know, that's the thing.
A moment ago, you mentioned the importance of dancing. You mentioned the importance of Tamla, Motown.
To us.
Yeah, but for you all, there was a huge influence of black music. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about. I've read that you know, Earth, Wind and Fire, and Chic, and bands like that. What was that like for you in Sheffield, hearing African American music, and what did you connect with on that?
Well, in the 70s, there was that whole kind of period when it was like a bit like disco sucks. So I'd come through and you'd hear all these brilliant disco records. And you think, well, these are phenomenal. You know, you kind of come into it later. But that tradition, it still exists, but that Saturday night live tradition of people going out, working all week, and then going out on a Saturday night and having a great time, listening to music, dancing. I mean, that still exists. People go to festivals now, don't they, you know, for that excitement. But yeah, I mean, alongside Joy Division and The Cure, we were listening to Sly and the Family Stone and, you know, Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, and Smokey Robinson. We wrote a song about Smokey Robinson later.
Smokey sings, yeah.
But I think a lot of that, I mean, I love music that's polyrhythmic, yeah, and it sounds silly to say that now because all music today is a mixture, a hybrid of all these brilliant styles, but back then there was different channels, different radio stations, so it felt good. But it all comes back to a time I went out, when I was kind of about 14, I went to a club, lied about my age, went inside, and it was, you know, I don't know, it's hard to describe, but they were very aggressive places to go to then. Maybe it's the way I looked at it, in Manchester and in Sheffield. But the DJ put on a record by Sly and the Family Stone, Family Affair, and I noticed everybody got on the dance floor, you know what I mean? Young, old, people that were kind of, you know, it kind of united everybody on that dance floor, and I think that definitely that feeling really stayed with me. You know, I wanted to make music like that, you know, that kind of united people in a funny kind of way. When you have a hit record, it's kind of, it's not like that, but it feels like that, you know, where you walk down the street and you can hear your music coming out of a window or something. That's a great feeling. That's better than, you know, you get your royalties, I suppose, but that's a magical feeling I carry in my heart, yeah, definitely.
So obviously you've been a part of some of these, yes. You've been a part of some of these really wonderful festivals that have been happening over the past few years, bringing bands from the 1980s together on the same bills, Goodbye Cruel World here locally that you played at.
Yeah, we played Cruel World.
Yeah.
Till the lightning bolts came down, yeah.
So, that's right. So, what's that been like, being a part of that experience?
Well, in the 80s, I'd be there on the American Bandstand or something like that, and it's great. You know, Lionel Richie's there, and who's this? Madonna. You know, she's doing Holiday or something. This young new singer. But at the end of the day, your record would get to number 4 in the charts, and instead of celebrating that, you go, "Why is it not number 3?" You know, it's ridiculous. So what I'm saying is, there's only one act could get to number 1. And it was fiercely, fiercely competitive, I think. You know, I think the record labels engendered that back in the day, definitely. You know, but years later, it's great. It's like joining the circus. You go and do a kind of festival. There's 14 acts, and you kind of reunite with. I know Belinda Carlisle well, and the Human League, and I don't know Orchestra Maneuvers in the Dark, and in Europe, bands like that. And I really do respect anyone that's been around for more than 10 seconds, you know, it's a strange existence. And it kind of completed a circle for me, yeah. From being a very, very uptight, competitive guy, it felt really good to kind of get on a stage and share a bill, yeah, very much so, yeah. It was like joining the circus, yeah. I'm like those guys, I don't know if circuses, do they still exist? Those clowns in those cars. I always wanted to be like those guys, yeah. Yeah, you know.
An 80s clown car.
That is show business, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah.
And obviously we were talking backstage about how it's not just the festivals, but music from the 80s is coming back in contemporary music with The Weeknd and Gaga and lots of other folks. It's on TikTok like crazy, getting rediscovered. It's definitely a really interesting moment where music from that decade is now becoming contemporary again.
Well, back in the 80s, there was a lot of experimentation, yeah. There was a lot of cultural aspects to it, in the sense that it kind of did open up a bit. I know there's a lot of bad aspects to the way the music business is, but there was, the business did evolve and change through people's will, I think. But there was a lot of experimentation technologically, you know, there would be a new synthesizer developed, and SIMPTE, and various things we take for granted now. The shoulder pads were big, the choruses were big, and there was that whole kind of aspirational thing, which is different to today. But it amuses me that the kind of, is it the nostalgia circuit, the rewind circuit's been going on, with the 80s has been going on for longer than 10 years, which was the original 80s, you know. Kind of. But it's gratifying to see some of the stylistic moves, you know, with The Weeknd, like say, or Lady Gaga, or different modern, very contemporary artists who are obviously listening to music from that period. The funny thing is, though, to survive any era as a musician, people kind of look at you after, you know, during the mid-90s, I go and see The Prodigy or, you know, Pulp or Oasis, and think, no, this is not my time now. You know, there's a whole new generation of bands arriving. And people go, what, you're still here? You know what I mean? But a few years roll by and you become an elder statesman of pop, and they go, my kids listen to your music now. Yes. So I think the 80s has been musically, and the film, you know, the John Hughes films and the food even, it has been kind of reevaluated in a way, yeah. Does that answer the question?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I just want to say to Anne that, you know, when I was in high school, just to bring it back, and I would stand in front of the mirror and I'd try to get my hair to look like your hair, and I would try to ask my parents for that gold suit, hook me up with a gold suit. It's really just a total joy to meet you and be here on stage.
Thank you very much.
In front
Thank
of
you.
this wonderful audience. Ladies and gentlemen, Martin Fry.
Thank you very much.
We're going to take a very, very, very short break. Don't go anywhere. And ABC will be on this stage.
We'll come and play. Thanks, guys. I hope you stick around for the show. Thank you.